and visual artifacts that we use in the Army to talk about ourselves and how we relate to our past soldiers, and how we have basically like a subculture in the Army. And this is how one way we new individuals right off the street get indoctrinated, if that's what you would like to call it, to our Army culture. So I'm just going to show through some visual effects just real quick. Here's our agenda. Just going to go through some the big ideas and context, some Army traditions and how we encompass.
Just lights.
Our symbols, our images, some of our pictures, and some of our traditions, and then how we highlight those in some of our museums and memorials. And then I'll take any questions. As you can see, this is actually me trying to keep it graphic, right? I'm not going to try to brief the slides. So I'm giving it to some personal experience. That's actually me right there. So in the modern Army, we still have horses to try to connect with our heritage. So when you have a big event, sometimes we bring out the horse detachment, and you actually have to ride a horse. I don't ride horses personally, so it's a traumatic event. A little bit about myself, to date myself. 12 years ago, I was sitting right where you were as an Ohio State student. I graduated in 2000 and got my commission from the ROTC department right over here at the corner. So it was good times here. Homecomings this weekend, right? Yeah, good time, good time. After that, I went to the officer basic and advanced course at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. Never been to Arizona, so got to go there for a good year and a half of education and training where I got to experience some of these events that we're going to talk about today. Then I went to California State University, got a master's degree, got some education. Went to the National Intelligence University in Washington, D.C., got some more education, another master's degree. And then right now I'm a student again at the Command and General Staff College, which is the Army's version of graduate school. So part of that requirement is outreach. Go out into the community and tell our Army story. So I get graded on this. Just as you all have to sit here, I have to do something like this. Okay? So we're all in the same boat. Just some experience. Uniforms. The Army, everything that we have and everything we do has a symbol, has a purpose. And it's actually really tied to some of our heritage. Going back to the American Revolution and some events, going back even further, it's linked. So it's not just a pretty blue uniform that I'm wearing today that is very uncomfortable, but it's tied to a tradition that goes way back. And we'll talk about those so you can understand some of the things of why the Army does some of its events the way they do. Because the Army sees it as levels of culture, is artifacts. Artifacts is really what soldiers see here on a daily basis. Our espoused beliefs, that's basically what our leadership tells us is important. And then our basic underlying assumptions is what we hold true, like taking care of our families. It's assumption that we have in the United States Army, so we take care of our families, and it's a very cherished belief. So, artifacts. This is really what we're talking about, artifacts. This is what we see, hear, and feel in the Army. And it goes through these big three subcategories, which we're going to focus really on our symbols, which is embodied in our uniforms, flags, and ceremonies. Myths. Talk about some myths that gets associated with every unit. I mean, is anyone here a member of like a sorority or a fraternity? Okay. All right. So, you're part of an organization, right, ma'am? All right, so you have your own stories that you know about your own organization that gets passed to the new generation of the pledges. Same thing with the Army, okay? Any organization. We have our own myths. You know, you get into one unit that has a higher reputation or stories about it than another, we'll go into. All right, so let's talk about the uniform. The Army goes through big transitions. We just switched to a new uniform, which I got on right now, which I said is uncomfortable. But we went through a new transition with this new uniform. And it's meant to tie us together with our past heritage. Can anybody tell me, your right, top right, what that uniform's from? Does anybody know? Not to turn this into a history class. You know, come on. Come on. Civil War, right? The Civil War. So the epaulets right here that I got on my shoulders, we're trying to link back with our heritage with the Civil War. So the Union Army back in the Civil War, they got those. So now we've incorporated them into our uniforms of today. But if you didn't know, that's actually French. The American Army took it from France. France was a major military power in the 1830s, and so we like to copy people that have done good jobs in the past, so we actually took it from the French. So the French Army has little epaulets like this. So today's situation. What is one? Can anyone tell me what's one common feature in this picture? These are buffalo soldiers, or reenactors. Anybody? How about this? Ohio State. What's their colors? Scarlet. Okay, you go anywhere and you see that combination. My son's room has actually painted that. So don't ever paint a wall red because it'll take 3 or 4 coats. So just in case you know that. Good tidbit in the future. But we have our colors at Ohio State, right? So those are our colors. Your sweat top, whatever, that's what it is. That's actually yellow is the color for cavalry, which is a type of a military unit. So as you can see, they all have yellow, okay? And that gets incorporated into our own uniforms. I'm an intelligence officer. So what little piece of individuality on the uniform is that's actually my branch color, okay? So every officer has a different color, depending upon what their function is. So someone that knows that would be able to tell from that different color. Some are red, like artillery. Some are green, like special forces. So you could visually recognize someone in a uniform, what they do by their function, okay? Which really goes back to why we have uniforms in the first place. It goes back to the tradition of identifying someone on a battlefield. There's lots of smoke, it's loud, so the more stuff you got on, oh, that's the person in charge. Which even goes back to today, where some of the traditions that we have, that is the rank, being able to tell who's in charge on the battlefield and who's not. Now, modern combat isn't like that, but we still have some of those same traditions that get actually included in our today's uniforms. Does that make any sense? Anybody got any questions? If you have a question, by any means, please ask me, okay? All right, the beret. It's always a good one. The Army went to the beret about 12 years ago. There's a lot of controversy on why we went to the beret, so I'm not going to go into that. But the beret is here, and we made our peace with it. One of the interesting parts for it was the flash. And most people don't know this, but that's actually a representation of George Washington's flag during the Revolutionary War. So we've actually now incorporated that from the Revolutionary War back in 1778. We've now incorporated today. Every soldier walking around that's not in an airborne or green beret wears the flash that's actually connected to George Washington's flag. So it's just a little tidbit of information and history that we bring together. Okay, another good symbol that we employ or use is medals. Okay, most people will not judge someone on how many medals they have and don't have. Back into the World War II, soldiers really didn't wear medals. But now, today, we've actually incorporated it into our culture as being able to identify what someone has done in their past. Just a real quick visual recognition. So another officer can see my uniform and basically tell you where I've been, what I've done, if I've done anything heroic, and what my function is, just by looking at this. An active duty officer could probably tell you all that information by just a quick glance. Does anyone know what this one is, the first one? It's in all kinds of movies. Anybody? Tough crowd. I'm not the one standing between you and the weekend, right?
Medal of Honor?
That is correct. It is the Medal of Honor, the top honor for heroism in the United States military. Okay, you see it in popular culture all the time. You know, main character's got the Medal of Honor. There's only 2 living recipients of the Medal of Honor, 2 from the United States Army, and we'll show that. But there's an order, with the Medal of Honor being the top, which goes back to the Civil War. And as we discussed, there's only 2 living members that actually received Sergeant Petrie from the Ranger Regiment and Sergeant Dunarius from Colorado. He's out of the Army now. He was actually the first in 2000. So that's a big deal. Actually living people that have the Medal of Honor. Something you might not know, if you get the Medal of Honor, even the 4-star general has to salute you. So it used to, everybody got general gets saluted by the private. Well, if you're a Medal of Honor winner, regardless of your rank, we salute them, regardless, wherever they are. Retired, not retired, they get a salute. Another medal, does anyone know what this one Purple Heart.
Well, what did those people do in order to receive the Medal of Honor?
There is specific criteria, but what I will tell you, the big one is going above, and the exact words are going above the call of duty. So they have done something where they put their lives on the line, basically, and risked it where you wouldn't ask someone else, like normally, to do. Like Sergeant Petrie, his unit got pinned down, and he actually took it upon himself to charge the enemy when no one else followed, by himself. So there's a great risk to life, and someone doing that without being forced to do it is one of the main criteria. Okay, does that answer your question? That's a great question. The Purple Heart. This is now awarded for being injured or wounded in combat. And it actually goes back to, you can guess, George Washington and the American Revolution. It was the first award ever given in the United States Army. And that's what it was right here. It came out of this service for a while, but then got reintroduced in the 1920s. And it's basically to show that someone has sacrificed for the service and has been wounded. And so that's why we've included the picture of George Washington, the original colors from the award, and George Washington's coat of arms. Yes, sir?
You may not know the answer to this. Why was purple chosen as the color? It's usually the color for royalty, right?
Blood.
Okay.
Blood. Yeah, blood. Yeah, only 3 people actually got that when it was originally given out. Only 3 people. And there's only 2 surviving representations of the Purple Heart, the original Purple Heart. Only 3 people got it. One thing, as you saw from the last picture, let me just highlight one thing. Everybody knows that is Commander-in-Chief, President Obama. Okay, so it's the highest award in the United States military. So who would you think would give that award? Congress, through the President. So there's a tradition where your highest ranking officer, or the person that can authorize that award, is the one that gives it to you. You know, it's almost like graduation when you finally get there. Graduation, where the dean of the school gives you your diploma. It's almost the same type of tradition for the military. So in the Medal of Honor's case, President Obama is the one that actually puts it around your neck, pins the medal on your shoulder. Same thing happens even at the lowest level. This is from one of my deployments. That was my boss, Battalion Commander Colonel Bernalini. So he has to go around and give everybody their medals because he's the one who approved it. So even at the highest level, all the way down to the lowest level, it's a tradition that carries on. And it has a practical application. I mean, we all have our bank accounts today. We all have our personnel records, our transcripts. You know, someone can go back and tell you exactly what you did. Well, back in the day, they didn't have that. So one way to validate that someone got an award was to bring that soldier out in front of everybody, all their peers, and have the officer actually give them the award, or give them the presentation, or the promotion, in front of all their peers, so there's witnesses. And that tradition actually continues today. There's no need for it. You know, you sign a piece of paper, this person gets the award, goes in their personnel file, it's done. But we still have the tradition of getting that soldier in front of everybody and have the commanding officer actually pin the award on their chest. So that's something that goes back hundreds of years that we still practice today. All right, patches. Patches and symbols. Since I only have one soldier in the National Guard, I won't get in a lot of fights. But this is a really big contention. You think Michigan, Ohio State's bad? I will tell you right now, the camaraderie, the inner fighting between soldiers in one unit and another is almost just as bad. It is almost just as bad. I will tell you, soldiers in the 82nd Airborne Division down in North Carolina are very competitive with the 101st Airborne out of Fort Campbell. So they're separated by 2 states, but they still have a big competition, particularly 4ID in the 101st Cav. They actually moved 4ID to another state. That wasn't the reason, but competition was really, really stiff. Okay, one unit would run 2 miles, the other one says, I got to run 2.5. So little stuff like that. So it happens, okay? So let's talk about the patches. Like I said, this is 4th Infantry Division. Before they had a patch, the unit was stood up for World War I, and their designation was the Roman numerals IV. And so you had soldiers coming from all across America back in the 1910s, 1920s. Well, IV, what does that sound like? Ivy plant, right? So after a while, guess what? The name is stuck. So what used to be the Roman numeral 4 turned into Ivy. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can get in front of the pictures, but 1, 2, 3, 4. That translated into the Ivy division, and next thing you know, 5 years later, they got their patch. And then it stayed to this day, just something simple like that. The other one, I already kind of gave it away. 1st Cavalry Division. What does that look like to you? I mean, take a guess.
Nice shield.
There you go. It's a Norman shield. That's exactly what it is. It's a Norman shield. The color, when we talked about cavalry, yellow. They've incorporated that into their patch. They ride horses, or used to ride horses. They've got the horse, and then the black line. And there's a whole myth about, the line that couldn't be crossed, the horse that couldn't be ridden. That's all myth. Stories about the patch. And also to tell you about this one, it's the biggest patch any soldier will wear in the Army. It's huge, okay? It is huge. And the myth is, the person that designed the patch back in the 1890s wanted the family members to be able to see the soldiers come in from a far distance, knowing that they were coming back, so she made the patch as big as she could. And it's stuck to this day. That's why that patch is so big. It takes up your whole arm. As my wife says, it's gigantic. But that's just a tradition that's stuck since the 1890s and continues to this day, that soldiers are very proud of, as far as their roots go. I'll just go real quick. People would call these flags, we actually call them the colors. You'll see why. There's a lot of colors up there, nice rainbow collection. But each color and each symbol has a representation of where you are. So just by seeing, basically, the white and red, I know, as a soldier, that that's an Army unit. Now, you hardly ever see them, but I know that red and white is an Army unit. And I can tell you right now, that's 4th Army, the Acorn. Same thing applies to corps. They all have the same color. There's only 3 corps in the Army, but their colors all have the same colors. The symbol in the middle changes, but the colors are the same. So if you see that flag outside a building, for example, you know that you're at a Corps headquarters or an Army headquarters. And those traditions have carried on today. One other thing of significance is this. Kind of looks like the Ohio flag, right? It's not a flag, it's a pendant. People will correct you on that one. That's actually a guidon. Guidons have their roots with cavalry. They used to actually, that's the symbol to show a squadron of horses. They used to have that. The officer would carry on a guidon. And we've continued that tradition today with our company, which is our smallest formation in the Army. It's called a company. And so the company has a guidon, which is our colors, which is extremely important. All the colors are actually a representation, a graphic representation of a commanding officer's authority. So when you see them with their flags behind them, like on television, there's a reason behind that. Is because the colors represent an officer's authority over that unit. Which might not make a lot of sense, but back in the day, back in the 1800s, one way you could tell where the officer, the commander was. Does everybody understand what a commander is, right? I don't want to go off on a tangent here. Commander is the person in charge, okay? Commander makes the calls, makes the decisions, and tells everybody where to go back, go forward. That's what the officer in charge does. So how do you find them on the battlefield to get that type of direction? They got the big flag next to them. That's where you could tell, with all the smoke and everything going on, that's where the officer was. So that tradition has actually carried on today. When you take control of a unit, you get the flag. So on the this photo right here with the blue flag, that's actually me. This is my change of command ceremony. So I'm taking command of a company. Okay? And this was back in 2007. The outgoing commander takes the flag back, gives it to our battalion commander. So our next higher boss, okay? Gives him back the flag, and then he gives it back to me. The moment I get my hands on the flag, I'm in charge. It's that simple. And it's done in front of all the soldiers. What you don't see is there's a huge formation in the back with all the soldiers. So they see visually that authority has passed from the outgoing commander to the new coming commander, and now I'm the guy in charge. Okay, so that's how important flags are. And they go with you everywhere. Out in the middle of the desert, outside your tent, they go everywhere. So when you see the flag outside the tent, you know that that's where the commanding officer is. Does that make sense? And that's just a tradition that's carried on for hundreds of years. Just something that's carried on. Any questions? Okay, and if you lose your flag, oh, that's bad. Oh, that's bad. I don't know if you've ever seen the movies, but you know, capture the flag. Everybody seen that? You know, heard the game, capture the flag. That's what it goes back to. Back in the 1700s, soldiers would get bonuses if they could capture the enemy's flag on the battlefield, which A, meant they killed the officer guarding the flag, and B, it meant that the unit would usually fall apart. When the officer is dead, that means no one can give direction, so usually the unit would just retreat and run away. So capture the flag, and our popular culture comes from that. If you capture the enemy standard, you huge promotion, pay, all kinds of good stuff. I threw this up here as a branch symbol. Branch symbol, every army branch has a symbol, and there's meaning behind it. We actually call this the MI bug, the military intelligence bug, because it looks like a bug. But there's actually 3 layers of symbols on top of it. Anybody point out one? Anybody? What's that? Yeah, okay. Anything else?
Sword.
Yep. There's a dagger. I know it's blown way out of proportion, so yeah, it looks like a sword, but a little dagger. Anything else? Everybody see the flower? Everybody see the flower, the little rose? Okay, so let me dissect this for you. Because you got, like I said, 3 images. There's a rose, there's a sun, and then the little dagger. Okay? The rose is actually from medieval times. I'm not going to go into history, but the Knights Templar used to meet under a church that had roses in the stone, and so they would say, let's meet under the rose, which was, Twitter speak for got a secret conversation. So they would meet under the rose, which rose now means secrecy. The sun represents Helios, the sun god that knows and sees everything. And then the dagger, I think that's kind of self-explanatory. You don't get stabbed in the back. So that's kind of all these images are all incorporated to represent what intelligence does. We're supposed to know everything. We're supposed to be secret about what we do. And there's always the risk that you're going to get stabbed in the back. So, we've all incorporated that in our symbol. You laugh now. It is funny. But that's what we call our MI symbol. Every branch has one. Every branch has one. This is just one example. We have 3 layers. Most branches only have 2 layers. Something we take for granted sometimes, marching. Everybody knows who those guys are? Romans. They're one of the first units to actually march in step. They were very successful, depending upon your opinion. So like I said, if somebody's successful, militaries usually copy who's successful. Okay? What else looks kind of familiar? Yep, standards, colors. They call them standards, but it's almost like our colors out front. And they're marching in step. During the late antiquity, that kind of tradition fell apart. And they didn't really get reincorporated until about the 17th century. Soldiers started marching in step again. And that's just a picture of the Civil War. As you can see, there is no difference. Officers in front, soldiers marching in step, to today. It's something that we continue to do. It doesn't really have any relevance to how we fight on the battlefield, but it's just a tradition that we carry on and keep. All right, real quick, social functions. I love these. Anybody see what that is? It's a toilet. Yes, it's a toilet. That's right. Dining in functions, very important. It goes back really to the Middle Ages. We picked it up from the British during World War II for being so close with our allies. We picked it up, and now it's a tradition that carries on today. Dining in is really only for members in the military, where the officers from a unit will get together and have bonding. Okay, bonding. And one part of that is the punch bowl, which is a toilet. It's clean. I promise you, it's clean. It's a toilet. And what's significant about the toilet is that we actually add there's an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic, okay? And we add There is an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic. Each alcohol or non-alcoholic, for example, that gets added, has a historical significance to a war that the Army's fought. So, for example, we might add Sam Adams beer to represent the American Revolution. We might actually then add, for the non-alcoholic, tea bags to represent the tea from the Boston Tea Party. Okay? So you see where I'm getting? You just keep going, and going, building on all the conflicts the Army is built to. It gets nasty. Okay? It gets really, really nasty. But it's a tradition. It is something that we've carried on, and if you can get yourself a toilet bowl, we're using the toilet bowl. Don't ask me why. I don't even have the answer to that, of why we use the toilet bowl. But again, it's clean. All right? It's clean. Dining out, it's a function that we have. It's not, there's no bowl, toilet bowl in this one. But the dining out's where we bring our family members, you know, wives, girlfriends, mothers, parents. We bring them so we can have an event together where we can actually celebrate what the unit's done. And it's really a good time. So it's kind of like a social function, ball. Everybody gets dressed up. You saw my wife was all dressed up. She loves those things. But it's just a way to go out and celebrate, wear our fancy uniforms, and have a good time. So, and there are times in events we have practical applications. This is me in Iraq in 07, having lunch. Good times. But one thing you need to know, and this is why I bring it up, is the significant cultural events. It's lunchtime in Iraq. The Iraqi army, they have to pay for their own food for lunch. So usually they don't eat during lunch because it costs money on their paycheck. So when someone invites you to have lunch, like a working lunch, it's a big deal. They're not getting reimbursed. They don't get to charge somebody else for it. It doesn't work that way. It comes out of their pocket. So once you have the opportunity and you understand that, when someone says, hey, you know, let's have lunch and discuss something, it's a big deal. Don't just say, no, sorry, I can't do it. So I did it once. Okay, sure, no problem. I did it once. We had kebabs, good food, and then you start getting invited over and over again, and you start building relationships, and you start getting asked to do more and more. I kind of drew the line at fish. Okay, fish in the middle of the desert just didn't sit right with me. So I kind of drew the line at fish, but everything else I was good with. So we do have, you know, limitations. Real quick, museums. Does anybody here like going to museums? Okay, all right. I was about to say, most people, if they did, they wouldn't raise their hands. All right, I love museums. And the Army, we have tons of them. We have Army museums all over, and it varies by subject, location, and function. Almost every Army post has a museum. And this is one way that we can actually bring new soldiers in and connect them to our past. This is the large infantry museum at Fort Benning, Georgia. That's where they actually train all the infantry soldiers, and they have a huge museum. Okay? What's your MOS? Okay, okay. You ever seen that kind of patch? The Follow Me patch? Okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Okay. But infantry soldiers have a very special patch that says Follow Me because they lead the way. Use air quotes. But they have a big statue. And that's actually in the rotunda of their museum. It's the whole Follow Me. And they have artifacts that go all the way back to the American Revolution. That's only specific to their function. Another one that varies is the Heritage Center. If you ever get a chance to go to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, it's off the interstate. It's the Heritage Center. And what they've done is they've actually taken historical notes and they've rebuilt things. So they've rebuilt a trench system from World War I from the historical record. They've built bunkers. They built an actual World War II barracks down. So you can see what the dining facility looked like, what the motor pool, what the company headquarters looked like, what the barracks looked like, and they actually have reenactors that go out there. You know, graduate students, students that need credit, they get briefed on what the history was, they get all dressed up, and they actually go out there and people experience the history instead of just reading about it. It's a great time if you ever get the chance. And they have lots of artifacts. There's one note, like when General Eisenhower or General Omar Bradley, you know, big names from World War II, when they die, they leave all their papers, all their artifacts. They leave it to these places, particularly the Heritage Center, and they keep it in case someone wants to study it. And also by location. This is the 101st. That was my first assignment after Ohio State, and I graduated. I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Told you I didn't like hot weather. Good times. because it's right on the Tennessee border, really hot. But in the 101st, they have a local museum where they keep all their artifacts from World War I, World War II, Desert Storm, and even today's complex. Well, if you didn't know it, there's actually 3 101 museums. There's one in Brussels, and there's one in France. So that's actually the one in France from the Bastogne, in the Battle of the Bulge. Battle of the Bulge, well, the 101st has a museum there. So if you ever get the chance, you'll see the same type of artifacts that people have donated. Which really comes to something very important about the museums. They're not just for our soldiers today, they're also for our veterans. And that's a critical thing you need to remember. For me, it might not be important right now, but maybe 30, 40 years where I'm older, it might be important to go see what I have done. So the museums form a very critical link in doing that. Does anyone know what this one is?
World War II.
That's right, it's the World War II Memorial. One of the privileges of being down at Washington for so long is I've had the opportunity to participate in what's known as honor flights. Has anyone heard of those? Okay, honor flights are where they get World War II veterans from across America. They get them together and they bring them together as a group and they fly them out to the World War II memorial and give them the opportunity to meet each other, to go see the memorial. And it's really a great time to hear their war stories and to get to meet these individuals that have served. And one of their favorite things is, does anyone know what this is? Kilroy. Where'd you see Kilroy from?
It was in a movie I watched, documentary I watched.
Okay. Has anyone else seen it in the show? Kilroy? Kelly's Heroes. I think it was on Seinfeld. Yeah, Seinfeld. Kilroy was here. It is a form of graffiti that just took a life of its own in World War II. Anywhere American soldiers went somewhere, somebody would always spray paint or carve Kilroy was here on the walls. And the joke was, is that if you got someplace first, you did this. So Kilroy was always there first. There was a huge competition in the 1940s trying to figure out who this guy was, how it got started. And the best explanation, the best myth, is that it was actually a shipping inspector on Liberty ships, the transports that took soldiers over. So he knew what ships he had inspected. He wrote Kilroy was here. So soldiers would get on the ship, and they're like, who is this Kilroy guy? Who is this person? And it just took a life of its own. So all over Europe, you've got graffiti. Kilroy was here. And so what they've done is they've actually incorporated it at the World War II Memorial, but you got to look for it. It's actually there. And those veterans, they love that. They love that more than you can imagine. It's trying to find Kilroy on the memorial. And it's really hard to find. It's very hard. All right, on something a little bit more serious, current memories. This was the memorial service for the Fort Hood shooting that took place. And what I want to highlight really is the helmet, the boots, the picture, and the rifle. Okay? That's a standard memorial that we have in the military, particularly in this case with the Army, that has a lot of significance. Significance is the boots that will not be filled, the weapon that won't ever be picked up again, and the helmet that's no longer needed. And that goes back a couple hundred years, where you had to do basically field expedient. Not to get into gory details, because I know it's Friday, it's coming up towards lunch. But you quickly had to bury someone that died. And you quickly had to mark where that person had died. So the quickest way of doing it was to take their rifle, stick it upside down, stick it on the ground, and then take their helmet and put it on top. You put the helmet on top so you knew what side the person had died from. Okay, because the enemy's doing the same thing. Okay, so you put the helmet on top, put the rifle down, so someone later behind you would know that someone's buried there and what side they're from. And it's not a tradition, but it's a symbolism that carries on even today in our memorial services. This is one for Sergeant Matthew that died when I was deployed the first time. And one thing I want to highlight is the roll call. We all had the attendance sheet, right? They got passed out in all your classes. You got the attendance sheet. The military has the same thing. It's called roll call. That shows that who's present for duty, and also it makes sure that you get paid, which is very important. They do that once a month to make sure everybody's here, everything's going right. In these ceremonies, they do the roll call, and they actually call the person whose name who died, and they call it 3 times to show that they're not present for duty. It's a very emotional event. The roll call is very emotional. And it's just a tradition that goes back to pay. We don't do that anymore. Okay, we don't have formations where we get everybody out every morning and say, you know, John Smith, present for duty. Yes, sir. You know, Jane Doe, present for duty. We don't do that anymore, but it's a tradition that still is in our ceremonies. Okay, we're almost there. Hang on with it. We're almost there. Reflag. I'm not going to bore you with the acronyms, but does everybody see where all the pictures and some of the symbolism that we talked about, how it gets incorporated in this? And this was a big poster. Okay, we talked about the colors, the traditions with the cavalry, with the horse, how that gets incorporated. Of course, you got to throw the patch in there. How they're rolling up the flag or unrolling the flag, which is the case, and they're saying goodbye. And what this is, when we say reflag, we went from being 4th Infantry, this is my old unit, we went from being 4th Infantry Division, okay, so we got the little mechanized tanks, we had tanks, tracked vehicles, to 1st Cav. The equipment, tactics, nothing changed except the patch. We got cowboy hats. You know, here you go, here's your cowboy hat, because it's cavalry, and then we got new flags, new colors, okay? And so when you do something like that, there's a huge ceremony, and that's what this poster was highlighting. And just 2 more other quick examples. This was actually the compound for the Romanian battalion. Anyone from Romania? Romania? Okay, well they love drafting the 2. Alright? And so instead of actually looking at concrete barriers, Army units, any unit, someone has artistic capabilities, you're going to get picked to go decorate all those concrete barriers. So in this case, you know, Camp Grapple, the Romanians decorated their stuff with bats everywhere. It's only showing one picture, but this concrete barrier had a bat on it, just to represent what their compound was. Same thing happened, we also saw the 1st Cav patch. Soldiers didn't like the concrete, so they painted a 1st Cav patch on the concrete. And then one of our artists, we were Alpha Company, Centurions. I'm a big history buff. That's what my major was history, so I got the chance to rename during the reflag what our company was going to be called, so I picked Centurions. And so he wanted to do a big poster and then put it outside the company headquarters. And so you'll see that all over Army units, is decorating, painting, in order to show a visual representation. All right.